You've been keeping score in your relationships without realizing it, calculating every act of kindness you've given and every gesture of affection you've received, running a mental ledger that tracks who owes what to whom because somewhere deep in your programming you learned that love isn't free. That affection comes with strings attached. That every time someone is nice to you, they're building a case for future demands. And every time you're nice to someone, you're making a deposit into an account you'll need to withdraw from later when you require proof that you matter, that you're valued, that all the care you've given wasn't wasted on people who will abandon you the moment you stop performing the role of perpetual giver, perpetual helper, perpetual emotional support animal for everyone else's needs, while your own needs sit in the corner starving and ashamed because you learned early that having needs makes you a burden. That asking for care makes you selfish, that love is something you earn through service and sacrifice, and the constant vigilant monitoring of other people's emotional states to make sure they're satisfied, they're comfortable. They're not about to withdraw the affection that's keeping you alive even though that affection doesn't feel like nourishment. It feels like a loan with interest rates you can't afford. A contract you signed in childhood before you could read the fine print that said, love in this family, in this dynamic, in this version of connection, will always cost more than it gives. You can't accept a compliment without immediately deflecting or returning one. Can't receive help without feeling guilty and indebted. Can't let someone do something nice for you without your mind starting to calculate what you owe them in return. What you need to do to balance the scales, what performance or service or emotional labor will pay back this debt of affection so you're not walking around feeling like you took something you didn't deserve. You overfunction in every relationship, doing more than your share, anticipating needs before they're spoken, taking care of everyone's feelings while yours get shoved down and ignored, and you tell yourself this is love, this is what caring looks like, but really it's fear dressed up as generosity. It's the terror that if you stop being useful, you'll stop being wanted, that your value is contingent on your output, that people love what you do for them, not who you are when you're not doing anything, and so you can never stop doing, can never rest, can never just be loved for existing, because existing isn't enough. Existing has never been enough. Existing without purpose or function or usefulness means you're taking up space you haven't earned and consuming resources you don't deserve, and eventually someone will notice and ask you to leave. Or worse, they'll stay but withdraw the warmth. They'll keep you around but make you feel the cold reality that their affection was always conditional on your performance. You sabotage relationships where people try to love you freely, where they give without expecting payment, where they show up without needing you to be perfect or helpful, or always available because that kind of love feels dangerous, feels like a trap, feels like they're setting you up for the inevitable moment when the bill comes due, and you discover that their generosity was just another version of debt collection, just a longer game of building up your obligation before demanding payment that will cost more than you can give. You trust the love that hurts, the love that comes with conditions and expectations and clear terms of service, because at least then you know the rules, you know what's required, you know how to earn your place. But the love that's offered freely, the love that says you do not have to do anything to deserve this, you do not have to prove your worth or demonstrate your value or perform your usefulness. That love terrifies you because if you're not earning it, then it can be taken away at any moment for no reason, and at least with conditional love you have some illusion of control, some sense that if you just try hard enough, give enough, sacrifice enough, you can keep the love coming even though it's exhausting you, even though it's emptying you, even though you're running on fumes trying to maintain a level of performance that was never sustainable but that you thought was the price of admission to connection. You learned this in a home where love came with invoices, where every act of parental care was mentioned later as evidence of how much you owed them, where, after everything I've done for you, was a weapon used to extract compliance, where affection was given strategically to manipulate your behavior and withheld punitively when you failed to meet expectations, and you absorbed the lesson that love is transactional, that care is currency, that nobody gives without expecting return on investment, and now you're an adult recreating that same dynamic in every relationship you enter. Either playing the role of the perpetual giver who's keeping score of what others owe you, or playing the role of the perpetual debtor who can never pay back the affection you've received. And either way you're exhausted. Either way you're trapped in a version of love that feels more like bookkeeping than connection, more like obligation than choice, more like survival than celebration, because you've never experienced the kind of love that just is. That doesn't need to be earned or maintained through performance. That shows up because it wants to, not because you've done something to deserve it. That stays not because you're useful but because you matter. And mattering without doing anything to earn it is a concept so foreign to your nervous system that when it's offered you either reject it as impossible or accept it while waiting for the other shoe to drop for the moment when the free love reveals itself to be just another version of debt collection with better marketing. The brutal truth that's going to hurt before it heals is that you don't know how to receive love because you were never given love. You were given conditional approval that masqueraded as love. You were given affection as reward for good behavior and withdrawal as punishment for falling short. And you learned to call that love because it was the only version available. But it wasn't love, it was control, it was manipulation. It was the systematic conditioning of a child to believe that their worth was performance-based and their value was contingent on their ability to meet other people's needs while suppressing their own. And now you're walking around as an adult with a nervous system that's wired for debt-based relationships, that feels most at home in dynamics where affection comes with strings, where care requires payment, where love is something you have to earn over and over and over. Because the moment you stop earning it, you'll discover you never really had it. You just had a lease agreement that was renewable based on your continued usefulness, your sustained performance, your willingness to abandon your needs in service of everyone else's wants. You can start to break this pattern by first recognizing it, by seeing how the love as debt model operates in your life, how you keep score even when you pretend you don't, how you overgive to feel valuable and underreceive because accepting feels dangerous, how you choose partners who confirm your belief that love must be earned because the alternative, that you could be loved just for being you, feels too risky to believe in. And once you see the pattern, you can start to challenge it, not by immediately trusting free love because your nervous system isn't ready for that, but by experimenting with small acts of receiving without immediately repaying, by letting someone do something nice for you and sitting with the discomfort of not returning the gesture, by practicing saying thank you instead of I owe you, by noticing when you're about to overfunction and asking yourself if this is really necessary, or if this is just your debt programming trying to keep you safe by keeping you useful. You can examine your relationships and ask yourself honestly which ones feel like connection and which ones feel like contracts. Which people show up because they want to, and which people only engage when they need something. Which dynamics leave you feeling energized, and which ones leave you depleted. And you can start to give yourself permission to move toward relationships that feel less like work and more like rest, less like performance and more like presence, less like debt and more like gift. Even though gift-based love will initially feel uncomfortable, will trigger all your conditioning that says this can't be real, this can't last. This person will eventually realize you're not worth it and leave. And you'll have to challenge those beliefs over and over until your nervous system starts to learn. A new pattern starts to understand that love doesn't have to hurt to be real, that care doesn't have to come with conditions to be legitimate, that you can be valued for who you are, not just what you do. You can practice being in relationships where you show up as yourself instead of as the person you think they need, where you have needs and express them instead of hiding them and feeling resentful, where you say no sometimes and discover that people who actually care about you will respect your boundaries instead of punishing you for having them, where you stop keeping score because you're not trying to prove your worth through accumulated acts of service, but instead you're just being in connection, just experiencing relationship, just allowing yourself to be loved in ways that don't require you to perform or produce or demonstrate your value. And this will feel wrong at first, will trigger every alarm bell in your system that says you're being selfish, you're not giving enough, you're going to lose them. But what you'll actually discover is that the people worth keeping are the ones who never needed you to be useful. They just needed you to be real. And being real means admitting that you're tired of relationships that feel like jobs. Tired of love that feels like debt. Tired of care that comes with invoices. Tired of performing affection when what you really want is to be seen and chosen and valued. Not for what you do, but for who you are when you're not doing anything at all. Just existing, just breathing, just being the flawed, beautiful, imperfect human that you are underneath all the performance, underneath all the people-pleasing, underneath all the desperate scrambling to prove that you deserve the space you occupy, and the air you breathe, and the love that should have always been your birthright, instead of something you have to earn one painful transaction at a time. Stop confusing debt with love. Stop letting people who take more than they give convince you that's what relationships are supposed to look like. Stop sacrificing yourself on the altar of other people's comfort while calling it care, when really it's just the programming from a childhood where your needs didn't matter and your worth was measured by your usefulness. And start slowly, carefully, courageously to experiment with relationships where love is given freely, where care doesn't come with conditions, where affection is offered because you matter, not because you earned it. And if that feels impossible, if that feels like a fantasy, if that feels like something that exists for other people but not for you, then that's exactly why you need to try. Because you've spent your whole life believing the lie that love must hurt, that connection requires sacrifice, that mattering means performing. And maybe it's time to discover that the love you've been searching for, the love that doesn't feel like debt, the love that doesn't come with strings, the love that just is, has been available all along. You just couldn't see it because you were too busy paying off debts that were never really yours, serving sentences for crimes you didn't commit, earning what should have always been free, and freedom starts now. With the recognition that you deserve love that nourishes instead of depletes, care that gives instead of takes, affection that celebrates instead of controls, and anyone who makes you feel like love is a debt you can never fully repay, is someone who never understood love in the first place, and you don't have to keep trying to earn what was never theirs to give conditionally.